everyone, I'm Mind, and let's do it. Let's talk about Ninjago Crystalized. Now I'm going to say right off the bat there will be spoilers in this video. I will be talking about the second half of Crystalized Part 2. So if you have not watched that yet, you may not want to watch this video. If you want to see my spoiler-free review, you can go click the card in the top right corner. But yeah, the purpose of this video is to discuss the season in its entirety. Now I'm going to say right off the bat, this is not going to be a scripted video. This is going to be me sort of talking off the cuff about whatever I find interesting, whatever I want to discuss. And it's meant to be an open discussion, so please let me know your thoughts in the comments. And also, it's mostly going to be about Part 2. I am talking about the season overall, but I've already talked about the first half on the channel. So specifically, I'm going to focus on the Crystalized Part 2 episodes, and then at the end of the video, I'll talk about my thoughts on the season overall. So we'll start with episode 13, Sinister Shadow. This is the one that's all about Harumi's backstory, and I don't know, when I saw this episode I had very conflicting feelings. I love Harumi, she's one of my favorite characters in all of Ninjago, but I really don't think she should have been brought back. And I was hoping they would justify it well, and I think they did okay. But I don't know, it does seem to kind of take away from her redemption at the end of Hunted. She has the realization at the end of Hunted, like, oh, I'm doing wrong. I'm doing the same thing to other families as what happened to my family. And that's why she's like, oh, hey, maybe destruction and chaos and everything is bad. Or at least that's what her face means at the very end there. But then they just sort of bring her back, and the Overlord convinces her to work for him by just being like, it'll be peaceful when it's all evil. And I don't know if that necessarily makes sense. I don't know if that fits with her character. So already it's like, I don't know how I feel about it. It is a very good episode. I like how we got flashbacks to Hunted. That was very cool seeing just that time period animated by Wildbrain. And it was very emotional, the scene of like Lloyd going through the debris trying to find her. So it was a well-made episode, but just the entire idea behind Harumi coming back is not one of my favorites. But that being said, it's something I came to accept. Listen, this is what the writers wanted to do. So all things considered, it doesn't like bother me that much. I'm pretty okay with it. Next we have episode 14, The Spreader's Design. I don't really remember this episode. I remember Harumi monologuing to Lloyd about stuff. I remember the ninja fighting the spiders, but yeah, I feel like not that much happened. It showed that Harumi was like, oh, I'm still evil, I'm gonna do evil, look, I'm gonna try to kill your friends. But yeah, it's not the most interesting episode. Not a bad episode by any means, I just don't have a ton to say about it. Then we have episode 15, The Fall of the Monastery. This is one of the best fight scenes in the entire show. This really showed like how strong and powerful Wu was. I really liked that. The subway car subplot felt like it took a little bit too long. Like, not that it's a bad thing, and it was cool seeing the original four interact and like problem solve together. But I don't know, it kind of felt like they were just finding something to do with those guys. But the actual fight in the episode between the Crystal Generals and Wu, Nia, Pixel, and Skylar, that was really, really cool. I love seeing all of them in action, and Wu especially. Like, him taking on all the villains on his own, that was incredible. The next episode, Darkness Within, this is episode 16. Again, it's another one where I feel like not too much happened. A lot of Harumi monologuing. We see the Crystal Generals transform at the end, which was a super cool scene. But then just the B-plot of the ninja getting rescued. Like, obviously that needed to happen, but I don't know, it wasn't the most interesting to me. But this is also where we get to see the Crystal King taking form for the first time, which is very cool. Then episode 17, The Coming of the King. Let's see, what was this episode about? This is when they launch the temple up into the sky. We have Lloyd fight against all the generals and lose. Okay, yeah, this was very cool. Okay, yeah. This was a pretty good episode. It's where Lloyd's trying to escape. It was really cool seeing all the generals use the different golden weapons in their crystallized form. I like how they all shot elemental blast. Like, the powers were all very similar, but when the set of quakes was used, it was more like a ripple across the ground. While the shurikens device were more like it was freezing up something. Like, it's very subtle, but the actual animation effects when each of the weapons are used is slightly different, and I think that was really cool. It was also cool them teasing what happens when the four weapons are united. Nice callback to the pilots and everything. I'm happy to see the golden weapons again. The golden weapons are one of my favorite things ever. We get a lot of personality from all the generals here too. This is really the last time we see them in full force, which is a shame. I wish they were in more of the season after this, but it was still very cool seeing them in this episode. And then we also see Harumi start to turn here, where she's like, hey, don't kill Lloyd. Lloyd could be cool maybe. And then she's like, Lloyd, get over here. Be bad, be evil with me. And then the scene at the very end where he grabs her and plunges into the water. That was really good. No, this was a good episode all around. These episodes are so short though. The 11 minutes are something that's very interesting. Episode 18, Return to Primeval's Eye. This one was pretty great as well. I love seeing that dynamic between Lloyd and Harumi. And like just watching the two of them interact without any other characters around, that was really fun. It was cool to see them in Primeval's Eye again. Because obviously Primeval's Eye was the last time they were working together where they weren't against each other. So it was cool to see them revisit that location. We also had the ninjas stealing back their vehicles here. It was cool to see Wu working alongside them. That was a pretty good subplot. And then the way it all comes together at the end with Zane fighting the Vengestone beasts in the air and then Nia on the bounty and then picking up Lloyd. That was a lot of fun. Yeah, another like action-packed, very fun episode. Now those are all the episodes that leaked before they dropped on Netflix. So So that's why I'm sort of like, oh, what happened? Because I can't really remember as much because I watched those a couple weeks ago. But episode 19, Catastrophe onwards, I watched yesterday, so they'll be fresher in my mind. So I'm probably going to have a bit more to say about them. So yeah, episode 7, Catastrophe. This one, I don't know. I don't know how to feel about this episode. So it establishes, like, the Vengestone Warriors, and it was cool seeing them fight and watching the ninja fight against them. But I don't know, I feel like kind of nothing happened and it went on too long. Like, it was just sort of them driving in circles and hitting into them and being like, we can't hit them. And even though it's only an 11-minute episode, I felt like that scene really dragged on. But then the B-plot with Lloyd, Wu, and Nia trying to figure out, hey, where are these newspaper clippings coming from? That was really good. I immediately connected the dots when they were like, oh, it's they're coming from Vinny's apartment. I was like, oh my goodness, I know who's living there. That's such a funny and fun concept. So the B-plot I did really enjoy. But yeah, the actual crystallized fight, like, I get they had to set up the Vengestone Warriors, and I'm not saying, like, this was out of place in the show, but it just kind of felt like it went on for too long. Like, I don't feel like this needed to be the entire episode. They could have done something more with that. Now, episode 20, Christopher. I really, really liked this episode. It was really cool seeing Garmadon back in the show, finally. A bit weird that it seems like it makes the Garmadon comic non-canon. Like, it sort of implies that none of that ever happened, which is weird because they specifically said, oh, that comic is canon. So that part's a bit strange. But it was really cool seeing Garmadon and Vinny's relationship and Garmadon, like, learning how to care, learning how to be more empathetic. And it was genuinely really adorable, Garmadon's whole relationship with the plant. The way he, like, actually cared so much to take care of it, I thought that was really cute. But yeah, this was one of those, like, slower paced, very character-focused episodes, but I think that is perfectly okay. I still enjoyed it quite a bit. And while I don't think I like it as much as, say, like, The Benefit of Grief, I still think it's really good. And then the very end, seeing Garmadon transform into his Oni form was genuinely awesome. Episode 21, A Lesson in Anger. The ninja are still out here fighting the, fighting the Vengestone Warriors at the very beginning. Luckily, that ends pretty quickly. But yeah, then they get back, they're like, we can't beat them. And then that's where Garmadon's introduced. I like this sort of callback to season 1, where Garmadon walks into the room and Zane jumps in front of Master Wu. He's like, Master Wu, get down, because something very similar happened in season 1 when Garmadon returned for the first time, so that was a pretty funny callback. I also like the use of the pilot's training music here. That was really cool. This establishes, like, the whole Oni form for Lloyd and sets that up. It also writes the mayor and the new ninja out of the show to conclude that arc from part 1. But again, this is another episode I feel like is a little bit too long. Like, I'm scrubbing through it again, and most of this episode takes place in the Samurai X cave, and they're all just chatting with each other. I get that's a conversation I need to have, but I feel like we spent so long just watching Lloyd attempt Oni form and it not working, and then just conclude with Pixel going like, oh, upgrade your vehicles. Like, I feel like this could have been half the length. Pacing, I feel like, is one of the biggest issues that this season faces. And it's like, why do we need an entire episode for this? I don't know why that was necessary. It's not like it was bad. Like, I enjoyed what we saw. But it did not need to be an entire episode. Because, yeah, it was literally just them talking and then the little news report where the new ninja get crystallized. Episode 22, Brave But Foolish. This is fantastic. It might be one of my favorite episodes, if not my favorite of the season. There's just non-stop action going on, and some really great character moments too. Watching the ninjas save the city in their vehicles was pretty cool, but arguably the least interesting part of this episode. I like the scene in the prison where Ruune stands up for the ninja. I feel like that really helps his character, because I know a lot of people were not a huge fan of how he was portrayed in the island, and personally, I didn't mind how he was portrayed in the island. I thought that was fine. But this kind of helps bridge the gap between Island Ruune and Season 5 Ruune, because you could see both sides of him here and see how that is one person. But no, that was really good, and I'm glad we got some solid running content this season. Also, the scene with Garmadon talking about Christopher, but then he's actually talking about Lloyd and Nia comforting him, that was really cool. The dynamic between those two characters is not what I expected, but that was like a small, very like heartfelt, touching moment. I enjoyed that. And then the fight scene between Wu and the Crystal King was genuinely fantastic. One of the coolest fight scenes in the entire show. I'm glad we actually got to see like Wu in action, because I feel like that's something we very rarely see. And we just saw it a few episodes earlier too, but like, man, this was amazing just watching those two fight. And the way like Wu was talking about his father, and the way like his father had always told stories about the Overlord, it was genuinely fantastic. The animation was amazing as well. And then the end of this episode where the bounty splits apart for like the millionth time. Wu is following all the ninjas' vehicles are getting like toppled over, and like everything seems bad after this episode. Genuinely very, very well done. This would be up there in like S tier episodes for me. Episode 23, Quentin Time. This one was interesting. It was cool seeing Nelson Antonia again, because I know a lot of people don't like the Nelson Antonia episodes, but I genuinely quite enjoy them. I think they're fun. Seeing that dynamic with Wu was really good too, but I don't know how I feel about him like giving up so quickly, especially because I feel like that's an arc he already had a few seasons ago. I want to say in Hands of Time he was like, oh, let's just stop, and then the ninja were like, no. But then he also sort of had that in season 11 and then in season 13. So it's weird that they sort of rehashed that again. But I do like where Wu ends up at the end of the episode, so it doesn't bother me too much. Then the Jay and Nia subplot's interesting. I don't know how I feel about Nia getting her powers back so quickly. I expected it to happen eventually. eventually, but I don't know, like, already? I guess it has been a real-world year without Nia, so it's not like there was no consequences for her merging with the sea. But yeah, I don't know, I'm not the biggest fan of how that was done. Also, the mechanic in this episode, I really could not stand. I love the mechanic, one of my favorite Ninjago characters. But for the second half of Crystalized, they just made him sexist for some reason, which is weird. Like, he has his rivalry with Nia, and he's like, oh, you're just a girl, you can't do anything. And it just really reminds me of Cryptor from Season 3, and it's like, that was the cringiest, worst dialogue ever. What is the point of that? And why turn the mechanic into that? Because the mechanic is such a cool character. You can make him evil without making him sexist. Like, what's the point? I don't know, that kind of annoyed me. But overall, I think it was a fine episode. This episode and the next two all take place, like, during the same time, which is an interesting, like, thing to try. Don't know how I'd feel about that overall, but it was creative at the very least. The next episode's one a lot of people did not like, but personally it's one I did quite a bit. The Return of the Ice Emperor. So we get to see more of the Garmadon-Lloyd dynamic here. Now, this is another thing that's controversial, is Lloyd's feelings on Garmadon, and how Lloyd doesn't want to embrace his Oni side because he doesn't want to be like its father. People don't like that, and I don't know why they don't. I get that people are saying Lloyd's going like, oh, all Oni are evil, but obviously we know that's not the case because Lloyd used to know Mistake, and she wasn't evil. So that side of it's a little bit weird, but on the other hand, I don't blame Lloyd for not wanting to be like his father. Because I think the idea that like, oh, Garmadon's trying so Lloyd should just forgive him is not exactly the best. Because even at the end of March of the Oni, the relationship between those two was never completely mended. There was always some friction there, and then Garmadon just left. And I forget if it was in this episode or in a later episode, but Lloyd tells Garmadon about how he was never there for him, etc., etc. And I think that's what Lloyd more means when he says, I don't want to be like you, is he's worried that if he embraces his Oni side, that's who he's going to become, and that's not who he wants to be. So while Lloyd might be going a little too far, I don't know, personally I don't mind like the way his character was treated here. And then we have Misako come back with a scroll, welcome back Misako, most important Ninjago character. And then we have the actual Return of the Ice Emperor bit, which honestly, I found very funny. I know a few people were upset about this, like how dare you turn the Ice Emperor into this, how dare you ruin the Ice Emperor like this, but I genuinely think it was a funny gag. And it fits with Zane and Pixel's characters, and it was a nice way to have some lighthearted fun before they got to the like sadder episodes later on. Also, the prisoners coming to their rescue was very cool. Again, I just like seeing Ruune as a good guy. I think Ruune this season was very, very good, even though he wasn't in it that much. Episode 13, Safe Haven, this was one that was very funny to me. Because at the beginning we get some like Kayak's Cole stuff, which I know like Ninjago Twitter would go crazy for. But then literally like 2 minutes later, Skylar comes in and we get some Kayak Skylar stuff, which is way more than we've gotten in the entire series. So it kind of negates the Kai Cole stuff. And obviously Kai Skylar is the official narrative the show is pushing, but I know a lot of fans go the other way. So I think it's very funny that they had both of those in the same exact episode. But no, I'm really happy to see Kai and Skylar's relationship develop, because I always thought they were cute in tournament, but that was never really built upon. And it was cool to see them working together and everything. The reintroduction of Jake as a character was fun too. And while this wasn't like the most action-packed episode, I don't know, there was like some cool character moments. And the dynamic of Cole, Kai, and Skylar I thought was really good. Then we got more of Lloyd and Garmadon in the library, which that stuff was fine, but again, I feel like that all went on way too long too. But I'll get into more of that at the end of this video. Also, the very end of the episode when Jake reunites with his parents and Skylar is sort of just like looking at them longingly, and then she turns to Kai. Obviously that's implying some like relationship thing with them, but I'm curious if that's like hinting towards like a Ninjago next generation thing in the future. Personally, that's not what I would want for the show, at least not yet. But it's very interesting that they did that, because it was definitely a very intentional thing, so it definitely makes you think. Episode 26, Compatible. I thought it was very funny at the beginning the way Kai asked Skylar out in the exact same way he advised Jay to ask Nia out in March of the Oni. That was a really funny callback. That was very awkward. And I like how they actually acknowledge the fact that, like, hey, they tried to be a thing, but Kai was never really there. And I hope that in the next series, then maybe they build upon the two of them more, because I would love to see more of them, because they do have a good dynamic when they're in the show together, but that is very, very rare that they are. We also have the Ninja's comms get fixed here. We get the introduction of Blazy H Speed, which is so funny. The prisoners get their own mechs, which is very funny. And then at the end, we have Pixel's parting words to Zane, which even though while watching, I'm like, I know Zane's gonna survive this, because I know he has a dragon form we haven't seen yet. Like, I know Zane's not dead here. But even still watching that, the dialogue with Pixel was fantastic in that scene, and it made me cry. It's the second time Ninjago has ever made me cry, and I cannot believe the robot girlfriend character made me cry. But as silly as I thought Pixel was in her first introduction, they really turned that character around for me, because she is a fantastic character now, and that was an amazing scene. But of course, Zane's okay in the end. Episode 15, Distress Calls. Nia goes out to the scene. She's like, hey, can you get Benthomar? And the fish are like, alright. And then Blazy, Vinny, and Cole are like, hey, Shintarans, can you come help? But then they think the message doesn't get through. And then we have some more Lloyd Garmadon moments, which again are good. I do like that. I do really enjoy their dynamic this season. It's just, again, them in the Serpentine Tunnels has extended across, what, like 4 episodes at this point? I really wish there was more for them to do. Then we get to episode 16, An Issue of Trust. This is essentially where they come up with their plan to fight the Crystal King, and they figure out the way that dragon forms are supposed to be achieved, but then other than that, it's pretty much leading into the next episode. Episode 17, Dragon Form. Now this is where we get to the last 2 episodes, and I don't know how to feel about this. This is where we get to like Avengers Endgame territory, where they're just like, oh, here's all the characters you know and love, they're all fighting together, and I don't know, I go back and forth on that. On the one hand, it was cool seeing everyone return, like Benthomar riding Zippy, that was awesome. But on the other hand, it kind of just felt like there was characters there for the sake of characters being there, instead of it making any logical sense for them to be there. Like, the Shintarans and the Merlopians, fine, whatever. But then the Prime Empire rats were there, but then also it was only Wild Brain characters because they didn't really have models for the previous season characters. Like, you're telling me the Whack Rats and Cole's dad showed up, but the other Elemental Masters didn't. That's a little bit silly to me. And then also the idea that, like, the dragon form can only be achieved when, like, most of your friends are there is really funny. And also the way they only had models for 1 Serpentine, or 2 Serpentine. They had Scales and Mesmo. And they're like, oh, the Serpentine are helping, and it was 4 snakes and 3 of them were Mesmo. I don't know, for, like, the finale to the series, like, they were advertising this up to be, that felt like kind of a cop-out. I wish there was a little more there. The scenes with the Golden Dragon Ninja were fighting to get back the Golden Weapons, though, were awesome. I really loved them. And the fight with Garmadon and Lloyd versus the Crystal King at the top of the temple was really cool, too. This is also where we get our Harumi redemption scene, which I know is very controversial. Personally, I thought it was fine. My issue with the Harumi coming back was the fact that Harumi came back. But if she's going to come back, I think it makes sense for there to be a redemption like this. Now, I don't think she and Lloyd should go and get married because I don't think their relationship is a good thing. But I also don't think it's a good message to give to kids that, like, hey, people are evil and will always be evil. Especially when Harumi's meant to be, like, a younger character who's still learning. Like, she's very much intended to be a young adult. Like, Sons of Garmadon was the first time she was really out in the real world by herself. So the idea that someone at that age is permanently evil and can never be redeemed, I don't think is a good message to put in the show. Because people can change both in real life and in the show. And while I don't know how I feel about her turning point literally just being like, oh, you killed my parents, not Lloyd, so I'm gonna go get you now. I don't know if that's the best way to do a redemption. Because we did see little nuggets of redemption as the season went on. And I kind of wish it was something else to push her to switch. But her being redeemed at the end is something I fully expected. So it doesn't really, like, shock or disappoint me at all. Also, the idea that the Overlord was the Great Devourer, right? That was the language that was used. Or more that he's the one that put the evil in the Great Devourer and told it by Garmadon to turn Garmadon into this vessel to bring the Overlord back. It's weird to establish that canon 10 years after it happened, but I think it fits in the world of show and honestly makes a lot of sense, especially considering, like, the Devourer's venom is what awakened the Stone Warriors. But yeah, the fight scenes in this episode were really good. I'm not sure about the narrative choices. Like, all the allies coming in felt very fan-servicey. And again, Harumi and the entirety of Crystalized, I'm just not sure about. But just accepting the fact that Harumi is back, I think they're doing her about as well as they can bringing her back. Also, this is where we see the very last of the Vengestone Generals. And this is one of my biggest issues with the season is I feel like they establish so much and then drop it. Like, the Vengestone Generals were such a big deal in the middle of this season, and I never really felt like they got a proper conclusion, but then they just sort of weren't really in the show for, like, the next 10 episodes. We had a little bit. We had an episode with the Mechanic and an episode with Pythor. But Asphyra, Vangelis, and Mr. F are just out of the show for a while. And I really wish they were more prevalent instead of just the Vengestone Warriors stomping on the streets. I wish we got to see more personality from those villains. Harumi, too, she was like a major part of the show up until episode 18, and then she was just gone again until the very end. I wish she was there more throughout, because her redemption arc coming back at the end, like, it was something they were setting up, but you had almost forgotten about it because it had been 10 episodes since we last saw it. And then finally, episode 18, Roots. This was a weird episode, so starts out, fight scene, Garmadon dies, oh no, Lloyd's very sad, he gets angry, he turns into an Oni, but then he's like, oh, I don't want to be an Oni, so then he stops being an Oni, and then the Golden Dragon Ninja are like, we're gonna die if we do this, but we gotta do this to save the world, so then they put all their weapons in the middle, and then their dragon flies up, and they get crystallized for some reason. Where do the crystals come from? I don't know. But the dragon flies up to the sky, and then the dragon, the dragon defeats the Overlord very quickly into the episode, in fact. Yeah, I'm scrubbing through the episode now. The dragon fight with the Overlord is shorter than the... The dragon fight with the Overlord lasted a total of 3 minutes, it looks like. Jeez, I didn't realize it was that quick. But yeah, they defeat the Overlord pretty quickly, and once again, Lloyd doesn't defeat the Overlord. The dragon defeats the Overlord. Lloyd's just sort of riding the dragon. But then we see the dragon is not the ninja. The dragon is the golden weapons and the ninja's elemental powers. And then it just sort of, whoop, disappears. I don't know about this. Like, I wasn't expecting them to kill off their entire cast of characters, but there's, like, no consequences. The scroll called it a selfless act. What was selfless about it? Like, yeah, they were fighting to save their city, but selfless implies it's, like, some sort of sacrifice or something. It wasn't. They give up their powers, but they imply their powers are gonna come back. It was very strange. I don't know. The dragon itself looked awesome in the show. I loved its, like, multicolored wings. I really wish it was like that in the set. The Golden Dragon Ninja looked really cool in the show, too. Oni Lloyd was awesome, but, like, he ultimately did nothing. And it's just like, why did we spend, like, literally 10 episodes establishing Oni Lloyd just for it to be nothing? And then, surprise, Garmadon's actually not dead. He faked his death to get Lloyd to transform into his Oni form. Very bizarre. Like, I don't know. This is such a strange finale. I don't dislike it by any means. It's just not what I was expecting. And then Harumi's just like a part of the gang all of a sudden, which I'm very curious where that's going to go in the new series, assuming the new series picks up from where this series left off. Because while I'm all for the message of like, hey, there's good in everybody, hey, Harumi realized she was wrong and she's switching sides, I'm all for that. But on the other hand, I'm not all for just like forgetting everything she did. Like, if her and Lloyd like actually do become a couple or something in the next series, I will not be happy about that. But then the actual finale I thought was very sweet. Garmadon planted Christopher in the ground. That was adorable and had a really nice message to it. And then the funniest scene in the entire show, I'm just going to play it for a moment. It's when Dareth comes up these stairs. He's like, I brought some friends, and it pans over, and the first person you see is a Hydro Whipper. He's number one on the steps. Like, you got other more important characters like Sally, Fujita, Vinny, but no, Hydro Whipper is the one that's front and center. And that made me laugh so hard when I first saw it. Like, look, all of these are named characters except for the Hydro Whipper right here. Why did they put him first? I am not complaining by any means because it's hilarious, but just like, I want to know the thought process behind that decision. And then I thought the actual final scene was very sweet, watching everyone work together to rebuild the monastery. You had a cute Kai and Skylar moment, you had a little cute Lloyd and Harumi moment, a little cute Lloyd and Garmadon moment. It was a very happy ending. But now with all the individual episodes discussed, I just want to talk about the season as a whole. Now, I've seen a lot of negativity towards the season on like Twitter and on YouTube and whatnot, and I understand where that's coming from, but overall I thought it was pretty good. There's definitely a lot of decisions that were made that I would not have made myself by any means. Harumi's redemption doesn't bother me, but the way that she was redeemed kinda does. I also think it's weird that like the show producers and everyone marketed this as the end of Ninjago, or the end of this current storyline. Because unless the 2023 series is something we're totally not expecting, like unless it really is like a Ninjago Next Generation thing, I don't see how this finale is any different from any other finale. Because, like, no characters died, the ninja lost their powers, but it's implied they're gonna come back. So it's like, okay, so there really was no consequences to any of it, and they're like, we're still at the status quo, everything's the same except Harumi's here now. Which isn't a bad thing, I'm okay with seasons ending like that, but when you hype it up as the end of the show, I was expecting, I guess, a little bit more. At the end of the day, it was just another Overlord fight, and the Overlord is my least favorite villain in all of Ninjago, and even after Crystalized. He's better in this season, but he's still pretty bad. The thing I liked that they did with the Overlord this season is he wasn't in it that much. Like, one thing I don't like about Season 2 is it's all about the Overlord, and he cannot stop talking, and we have, like, entire 15-minute parts of the episodes where it's him talking to Garmadon, and it's like, oh my goodness, stop. In Crystalized, though, he's barely in it. The show's all about the threat he's causing, but we barely ever actually see the Overlord, except for, like, in actual fight scenes, and I think that is the way to do the Overlord well, where you can still enjoy the season, not just be like, God, this villain's written so poorly. I do think a character should have died. Probably Wu or Garmadon. I think it's weird that Garmadon's death was a fake out. But I think Wu's death actually would have been pretty good. It would have been a nice motivator for the ninja. Because it is still strange to me that he's still around. I absolutely love Wu, don't get me wrong. But for like a grand finale season, and when you're fighting the enemy that your father fought, I think it would have made a lot of sense for Wu to like fight the Overlord and go down to him. And yeah, like I said, the pacing was a bit weird. It's so strange that the final fight was literally 2 minutes long. But then we got 30 minutes of Lloyd and Garmadon in the Serpentine Tombs for a 2-second clip that led to nothing. I also think a weird thing about this season is how it all sort of just takes place in an afternoon. I think that's another big thing about this season. It's like, think about most other Ninjago seasons, they take place over a period of time. And yeah, usually obviously the final battle itself is in one day, but usually the final battle is 1 episode or 2 episodes. The entire second half of the season all took place on the same day, which kind of made it feel less tense in my opinion. Like, compare this to, say, Hunted, It was a similar thing where there was like a big bad guy controlling the city, and there was a resistance fighting against that big bad guy. That had been going on for months before the ninja finally confronted Garmadon and defeated him. So there was that sense of time, that sense of doom. Or even something March of the Oni. Like, yes, March of the Oni takes place over the course of a day, but it's a very short season. And while the first half of the season's pretty good with their pacing and there is like the passage of time, I feel like the second half just all takes place right at the same time. There's no time to calm down, no sense of urgency. Like, I don't know, take the whole vehicle subplot, for example. Pixel just upgraded them in like an afternoon. Imagine the ninja had to go like figure out a way to fight the Vengeance Warriors while Pixel was working on those upgrades before they got the vehicles back. It all just felt like so many things happened very quickly. I thought the characters though were great this season. I loved every single one of them. I felt like every character was full personality and had things to do. And I'm thinking about it, yeah, there was a subplot for every single main character, which made me happy to see. Wu was great this season. It was great to see Garmadon back. And I'm just very curious where the new series is gonna go. So I guess when they said the end of this current storyline is they meant the end of the Overlord storyline. Though, is the Overlord even dead, or is he gonna come back again? Because I sure hope he doesn't. Also, by the way, they still haven't fulfilled the the Green Ninja prophecy, because the Green Ninja prophecy said like, oh, the Green Ninja will defeat the Overlord in the final battle, and he did. But then Zane defeated him, and then this time the dragon defeated him. Lloyd still hasn't defeated him again. So the Green Ninja's the one that will inevitably, like, finally defeat the Overlord. He still has not done that, so that implies the Overlord is still out there somewhere. So I don't know, I'm talking about a lot of criticisms, but overall I did genuinely really enjoy this season. I think in my rankings it is number 7 on my list, and that would be below in no specific order: Rise of the Snakes, Tournament of Elements, Sons of Garmadon, Hunted, Skybound, and Seabound. I think the first half of the season is definitely way stronger than the second half, and the second half is action-packed, and I genuinely do love a lot of it. It is just those 2 finale episodes where it just sort of devolves into like, okay, yeah, everyone's here, wow. So yeah, I guess we're gonna have to see where the 2023 series goes. I am very excited for that though, because I just love Ninjago. I don't like being a hater. I know some people are way more critical about media. Like, if I was sitting here trying to be a movie critic, there's a lot of things I could say about the season, but at the end of the day, it's Ninjago. I like Ninjago. It was good Ninjago, so I don't really have many complaints. But yeah, I'm very curious what the next series is going to entail. If you guys have any predictions, let me know in the comments. And if you'd like to see a follow-up video talking more about the season, let me know. If you have any specific questions for me, anything you want to see me talk about, touch on, I didn't touch on this video, because I have a lot of thoughts that I probably did not mention in this video, because there was a lot of episodes to get through. But yeah, those are my thoughts on Ninjago Crystalized. It was pretty good. It was pretty good. I liked it. It was pretty good. Very exciting video coming out tomorrow. And if you enjoyed this video, please press like, subscribe to the channel if you're new. I do LEGO Ninjago videos just like this one almost every day, so if you subscribe, you'll be the first to see them. Thanks for watching, everybody, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye.